Hi, everybody. Welcome to We Vote. Let's talk DA again. Let's talk DA again. And the question is, does the DA have an identity crisis? Now, I don't know if you remember, this channel actually covered the DA, I think in our second episode. So 5 episodes later, we are back. And we are back because Gwen Ngwenya, their head of policy, has resigned, and her resignation letter is an agreezy testimony in and of itself. I mean, let me read some of the drama that she exposes within the DA, or some of the problems that she exposes in the DA. Jumping straight into it, here's what Gwen says about the DA. The bottom line is, I do not believe that the DA takes policy seriously. That's her bottom line. That's what you need to take away from her letter. But let me read some more from her letter. Ideas are not a battleground the DA likes to tread. I left a job I enjoyed immensely to move from the night watch into what I thought was the front line of the battle of ideas. I was wrong about the nature of the battle that I'd be engaged in. It is unfortunate to come to the realization that I have never, in any meaningful way, been the head of policy. I'm going to read that again. It is unfortunate to come to the realization that I have never, in any meaningful way, been the head of policy. In practice, all this resignation means is that from today, I am no longer available to be the face of the policy. Wow, what an explosive letter. Let me go for some more highlights from this letter, some more highlights. She says, this resignation should not come as a surprise. The terms of hire were never met. No job description. Inexperienced research stuff. So she's saying that she was set up to fail by the Democratic Alliance. She says the policy offer for the national government in waiting should not rest on the shoulders of 3 inexperienced researchers. This is what she says in her letter, that the researchers were inexperienced. There was no budget. She further on goes to say there was no budget to meet with experts around the country, party constituents, to purchase the data, reports, software, etc. that are necessary to run a research operation. There is no reason why the party cannot have a policy unit that rivals any of the think tanks from which we frequently seek advice. Now, something about those reasons actually gives me pause for thought, because it tells us that the DA has been designing their policy on the basis of think tanks. The South African Institute of Race Relations is an example. There are several think tanks that are economic think tanks that are present in South Africa and dominant. The Free Market Foundation is another one. So it's actually something that I think journalists should look into, to say which think tanks has the Democratic Alliance been utilizing as part of their policy formulation framework before this. But there's more drama in this letter. Let me go through all the drama, then we'll talk about it a little bit. I have never had an opportunity lasting more than an hour to present the full range of thinking on policy for the party. Some of the policies developed have been shelved without any discussion whatsoever. At no point did the senior leadership A, recognize that the policy unit was working on the mandate given by the Federal Council, B, admit that they knew and approved the policy commissions as the consultation process for the policies. Instead, there was an apparent distancing of the leadership from the policy process with constant reference to Gwen's policy. So Gwen was writing all this policy and it kept being called Gwen's policy, not DA policy. This is in her letter. It's interesting. She then says, in practice, it is the CEO who decides on the policies of the party and not the elected representatives. She's exposing what happens in terms of policy within the DA. The CEO is the one who comes up with the policy. Now, this is interesting because I'm going to tell you who hires the CEO just now. The CEO is hired by the chairperson of the Federal Council, who is James Self, the longest serving member of the DA with 19 years. The disciple of Tony Leon, the liberal, neoliberal himself. So if you want to know where is the policy formulation coming from within the DA, it is coming from James Self, classic liberal, neoliberal. That's going to matter a little bit later. She then goes on, and this, I'm going to read it in its entirety. She says there was a political fallout from the article on BEE. In August 2018, I published an article indicating that BEE had not lived up to expectations and that the DA was exploring a policy alternative. None of that was not true. At the Federal Council in July, I had been given a mandate to explore a non-racial alternative. Furthermore, I quoted your own word, this is the federal leader, Mmusi Maimane, from Ebokamoso, saying, "We need a wholesale change in empowerment policies to move away from race-based policies that enable elite enrichment towards policies that fundamentally break down the system of deprivation that still traps millions of South Africans in poverty." The result of communicating what was a party mandate and the words of the federal leader was a public repudiation of my position by the federal chairperson, and that's Athol Trollip. Trollip was like, nah, to hell with that. We don't recognize that. I believe he acted on the wisdom of our communications operation, which is coming from the corporate arm, which is ruled and decided upon by the CEO, appointed by James Self, longest serving member of the party. That's basically all the spice from Gwen's letter. And I must say, it has significant weight because she is and was the policy expert. What does it say and what does it mean when your head of policy says this is shit and I don't want to be involved anymore? I'm going back to being a regular MP, which she may not be after the elections in May, right? So the DA seems to have an identity crisis, and this identity crisis, I spoke about it in episode 2. They don't have a policy framework. They don't have a strategic direction. They are plagued by scandals, right? And I read somewhere, for lack of vision, the people perish. And if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Right now, the DA has no plan. They have no stratagems, no agenda, no ideological positioning that is clear to the country. And all of this comes from their elective conference last year. I don't know if you remember, there was a fight last year around certain things. Mmusi Maimane wanted diversity to be included in the constitution. Ultimately, diversity was included, but individual diversity and not group diversity. So what the DA values is individual diversity. And some of the people were even asked about this. In a room with 10 white people, 10 white men, in fact, the definition of diversity in that room would still be fulfilled by the DA definition. That is clearly not what people have in mind when they're talking about diversity. So the DA diversity description as it stands now is that we are all diverse individually. So if you get 10 black men, right, and put them in a room, we are diverse because we didn't grow up in the same house, we think differently, we may have grown up in different areas in parts of South Africa, and as a result, that room is diverse. There is a small case to be made for valuing individual difference. However, it undermines the case for valuing group identities where and when those group identities need to be emphasized. And the DA missed that boat altogether. Then there was a rejection of quotas, and that rejection of quotas then manifested itself when Mmusi Maimane said that the party needs to be more representative of the country in parliament, and he was chided and reprimanded by none other than he who has no matric, John Steenhuisen, the blockist of note. So you need to think about all of these things when assessing what identity crisis the party has. Then Mmusi Maimane was attacked by several members of the party, and then they called it a heated debate when he spoke about white privilege and black poverty. They then said, no, don't give these things racial identities, don't speak about them in this particular way. And what that all means is that the DA is confused about the political moment that South Africa and even the world is in. They are confused about social justice academic theory, critical race theory, they're confused about all of that, and they go to a default Helen Zille position of just saying that's grievance politics, etc., etc. But now this is where the divide within the party lies. This is why guys like Makashule Gana could not be chosen to be the candidate for premier, because these are people who stand for the social justice component. They are social democrats, and social democrats actually are very well within the field of being social justice proponents. That means they do recognize privilege. They do recognize the operations of privilege, be that male privilege, white privilege, and also other forms of economic privilege that may manifest themselves. You know, people like Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, they stand actually for increasing taxes. They stand for limiting the size of the capitalist operation through an active government. And these are not things that classical liberals stand for. So the fight right now within the DA, the identity fight, which is manifesting itself in terms of what identity does the party have, is coming from this divide between the social democrats and the classical liberals, who a lot of whom are actually neoliberals as well. And neoliberal economic policy is not the kind of policy that will find a lot of resonance in the South African ecosystem. Basically, the DA has been taking L's all through December, all through last year. Let me run through the L's. Most recently, the billboard. Why was the billboard an L? Because one, it was an appeal to emotion, an illegitimate form of argumentation. They were trying to use the emotion and the suffering and the death of people to get people to vote against the ANC, instead of presenting their ideas and defending them in the public space, which they have not done. I asked Musi, when is the manifesto coming out? He didn't know then. Now we know it's late February. We'll even see whether they have a valid manifesto. My prediction is going to be a disaster. 2, Solly, the scandal Msimang. Solly is a scandal magnet of note. He's been pushed out from mayor. The argument ostensibly is that so that he can focus on his campaign, but this is a rubbish argument. We already know that this is not a necessary thing to do. We already know that many people have run for premier without necessarily like giving up their mayoral positions. This is just something for Solly because they're trying to manage the damage from him and his 12 billion rand irregular tender, his irregular appointments. Solly is Mr. Irregularity Msimanga, Mr. Scandal Msimanga. There is no limit to the amount of chaos that man will rain upon the DA if he ever were to get into a position of power again. His track record is not good. So Clifton Beach, the response, the exposure of private security arrangements being made by the Democratic Alliance government in Cape Town, and the way that those particular securities were acting in black hostile and poor hostile ways is another scandal the DA has not been able to live down. And now, right as we're about to get into the end of the month, the 4th L, within 30 days, Gwen Ngwenya resigns. And to quote her, remember what she said? She said, the bottom line is I do not believe that the DA takes policy seriously. The battleground of ideas is not a place the DA likes to tread. I have never in any meaningful way been the head of policy. What she then tells us is that in practice, all this resignation means is that from today I am no longer available to be the face of the policy. That's about fronting. That's about tokenism. And some people have said Musi Maimane is a token. Does the DA have a leadership crisis? I say hell yeah. You might say hell no. Either way, let's talk about it in the comment section. Like, subscribe, comment. There's going to be a great prize. I'm going to announce it. It's that book by, is it James Baldwin? Yeah, that's the prize. James Baldwin. Comment. First 20 people to comment enter you into the competition. Good luck. This has been episode 7 of We Vote. Till the next one, Tuesday, 3 p.m. Don't miss it.